Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Today, we're going to review an album by an English musician and electronic artist named Jon Hopkins. The album is his fourth studio album. It's called Immunity. And I had heard of Hopkins before, but I had never actually listened to any of his work. So this was actually really exciting for me to dive into, especially an album that, a lot of, first of all, I want to thank you guys, our VIMTV's fans. You guys have done a great job this year requesting 2013 releases, letting us know what albums are really good that we need to check out that may not be at the top of our radar. Just as albums release every week, it's kind of a challenge to sift through all of them because there's quite a list every single week. This is one that you guys singled out as being an album that we definitely needed to pay attention to and eventually review. So here we are, Immunity. Tom, how would you describe this album? I mean, to me, this album it's more than just an electronica album. It's dense. It has this atmospheric side to it. I think that one of the things Hopkins is definitely doing on this album is he has these dense creative beats, but he also combines that with this thick layer of atmosphere.
Definitely.
And it's that dichotomy, I think, that really sets this apart.
I totally agree. Those are the two biggest elements of this album, is where you have the beats taking the lead and where you have mood or atmosphere being the focus.
Right.
And it's nice because he really played those two into this album to create an album experience and a smooth listen. It starts with the first half being a little more focused on that thick electronic beat, some things just kind of swirling around in the background, supporting that, giving a little bit of melody and a little bit of movement. And then by the end, it falls off a little bit in terms of energy. There's this electric, not just electronic due to the kind of music that is, but I would use the word electric energy running through this, just surging through the first half of the album, really kind of getting things upbeat and getting them, that you get that kind of like nightlife, cityscape vision in your head when you're listening to it. And then by the end, things get a little somber, they get a little slowed down. The beat isn't as prevalent, but what are some, piano melodies, some just kind of like softly pulsing elements in the songs. And they really bring a lot of emotion out. So I thought that the way the whole album was sculpted to flow with that regard, instead of just kind of jumping back and forth between those elements haphazardly, just shows huge attention to craft and planning.
Right, and that's something that with electronic artists, I always feel like is kind of a struggle. There's always, with electronic music, it always seems to be more focused on the sound than the songwriting. And I think that the real beauty of electronic music is when an artist finds the balance between the two. Because sound is so, having like a defined, rich sound is so important, but also is taking that sound somewhere and delivering it in a vessel that you're taking your listeners from point A to point B. That's part of the reason why we fall in love with the albums that we do. And I think if we all look inwards into ourselves, I mean, we understand that we like to have experiences, the idea of the listening experience. This is something that Hopkins, I think, is really cued in on. I think he really understands that he's designing a listening experience with his album, especially on Immunity. That was clearly evident to me. One thing that I know he's focusing on songwriting, I think one example of that is how he's able to just give you these melodies, but he's giving them to you so subtly. Like these, whether it's piano or something synth-based, it's just kind of there. Like it's not like this big in-your-face melody. It's just kind of creeping out from the beat and the atmosphere that's the predominant sound on the track. You have this melody kind of creeping out and just kind of providing, it's just there, and all of a sudden you just have this realization like, oh yeah, that's really catchy, and it's there, and it like snuck up on you.
The way that he does that on some of the earlier tracks, like track 2, Open Eye Signal, and track 3, Breathe This Air, reminds me a lot of Aphex Twin's Selected Ambient Works albums, kind of harkening back to that very early era of electronic music, but then also fitting it in with that very modern, very thick production. I mean, what's cool is that this album is mastered and produced to be really loud and really potent. I mean, I actually had to turn this down on my computer from the normal volume setting I had it at, but at the same time, I don't think it loses any of the dynamics for it. I think it makes everything very clean cut, very clear, but at the same time, you still get those subtleties in the mix. It's kind of a give and take, because a lot of the times when you compress or even over compress music, you lose those dynamics, and the things that are going on in the background of the mix tend to just kind of get washed over by the larger parts of the mix. But I think that this is a terrific balance in production intersection between getting everything to sound loud and present without sacrificing any of the subtleties that really make Immunity what it is.
Right, and this is only an 8-track album.
Yeah.
On the first 4 tracks, I feel like he takes you somewhere. And really, track 4, Collider, is, to me, the intensity high point of the album. I feel like that song is, it's A, the most repetitive, and B, the most dynamically intense, and also just from like how he's producing it, I think it's the most in-your-face song on the album. Now, where I think that he's showing his craft and how he's sculpting an album is he follows that up with track 5, Abandoned Window, which is this beautiful piano-based track, very atmospheric. It's almost haunting at times, and that song kind of just serves as a transition from like the big loudness of Collider into the rest of the album, which is a bit softer. Now, to me, this is where I think you and I disagree a little bit on this album, Tom, is that I kind of felt like the last 3 tracks, like Formed by Firelight, track 6, I felt like that was a really nice track. It also continues the piano theme a little bit, but it could have been a little bit more intense and kind of given the back half of or the back third of the album, rather, a bit more spark, because the 12-minute track 7, Sun Harmonics, was a bit, I just felt like it just kind of went on and didn't completely justify itself. And then the album, I think, closed nicely with the damn near Cigar Rose track.
Yeah, might as well be.
But Tom, I know that you really like the 12-minute Sun Harmonics.
I had a very different experience with you, or than you, with that one, because those were actually 2 of my favorite tracks, were the last 2 tracks.
I really like the last track.
And the reason that Sun Harmonics as a 12-minute, second-to-last track worked for me is because I felt like it was a good kind of decompressing period between the more moving parts of the album, and then, moving technically and then moving emotionally in the latter part. So for that, it kind of let me trance out and kind of wind down from a lot of the big beats that I had heard in the first part. And then by the time I got to the end, I was like, wow, I'm ready for this kind of emotional peak of the album, and I feel like that journey that I've been taken on through that first part really led me somewhere.
And especially with like Immunity and track 8, closing the album with kind of an emotional note, I think is a potent move. So overall, I felt like this was a really tight listening experience. I enjoy listening to this album each time. I find myself coming back to it and finding new things to fall in love with.
I always really enjoyed it as well. I always looked forward to listening to it.
Yeah, so I think like to score this, I keep like coming back and forth, but I think I'm going to settle on a low 80 score, which is very good for us. I'm going to go 82 on this one.
You know what? Before you wrote that down, that is what I was planning on giving this. We've been giving a lot of the same scores lately.
We're trying not to talk to each other about the scores we're giving ahead of the review, so it's really funny to see how we come to the exact same score.
It's true.
Every time. So 82 from us at Velocities and Music. What did you guys think of Immunity? Please leave us a comment at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. That's where we do a lot of talking with you guys. You guys actually just left a glorious amount of responses to what album you would take with you on a trip to a desert island for a year.
I love it.
Yeah, it was a blast reading those. So thank you for your participation. You guys are what makes VIMTV go. So thank you. We love you. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.